Okay, it looks like we lost the feed. The internet just blipped out there. Maybe I would. Hey, I'm just reading NBC News. I don't know why. I don't know why. You know, I mean, U.S. Why are you getting mad for? I'm only reading your mainstream news here. I'm just trying to read the. I'm just. I am like, I am like Anderson Cooper here. I'm just like Ann Curry. I'm just reading your news. That's all I'm doing. Why are you getting mad at me? No, I don't know. But I'm sorry if the stream blipped out for you. But we did have a quick, we did have a short error there. So let me just see if we can get back here. Is it back? Okay. Anyways, scholars and activists say that Native Hawaiians have ultimately been seeking the right to self-determination or decision-making power on their lands, and the lack of thereof is a root cause of the wildfires. The gaining agency and decision-making power they add is critical to healing. So, because somebody commented, I posted this like on social media, I forget where exactly, but somebody commented, "Oh, this seems like this cover story. It seems like it makes it seem like Hawaiians are causing Hawaiian sovereignty is causing the fires." But no, if you read the article, that's not what it is. It's very strange, but this article, like NBC News is like doing better journalism than the Civil Beat, the Honolulu Star Advertiser, the Hawaii News Now. All the Hawaii news is all garbage, and then the national bigger American news is like letting this thing get published. It's pretty amazing. Anyways, so but yeah, so they actually say that the lack of self-determination of Hawaiians under the illegal occupation is the root cause of the wildfires. Which that's the truth. That's what I would say if somebody asked me. So anyways, okay, so Lahaina is not America. That fire is American, and it really was really lit as far back as 1893, said Keala Kelly, a filmmaker and sovereignty activist, referring to when U.S. troops illegally overthrew the Hawaiian Queen. Once the system of governance in Hawaii was stolen from us, everything about land and water became this never-ending abusive system of theft. So, that's all I would confirm and sign off on all of that. What is sovereignty? They interviewed multiple Native Hawaiians, like many, many different Native Hawaiians about sovereignty. Ron Williams, archivist in the Hawaii State Archives, it's evolved when Hanani K. Trask. So they're directly citing Hanani, right? This, in this, the video that I'm constantly resharing, this one, right? So they like the reason why I constantly share it, because this is one of the best and succinct statements of the actual history of Hawaii. And the Native Hawaiian sentiment and feelings, right? Where she goes on her "We're Not American" speech, and so they talk about this specifically. So when Hanani K. Trask, the late leader of the Hawaiian sovereignty movement, was arguing for it, it was a kind of recognition of Hawaiian sovereignty, breaking away from America. But what we've come to understand is how illegal the proposed annexation was. It was really clear that in 1898, annexation never happened. So if that's true, we are left with sovereignty remaining with the Hawaiian Kingdom, which means we're under occupation. When I often talk about the U.S. military occupation, the legal occupation of Hawaii, the U.S. Fraudulent annexation and illegal military occupation. That's because that's what it is, right? Even under international law, that's still what it is, right? NBC News, American mainstream outlet, even admits that's what it is. Keanu Sai, political scientist and founding member of the Hawaiian Society of Law and Politics. Dr. Keanu Sai is currently in a suit against the United States. David Keanu Sai versus Barack Obama. So he actually is suing the United States itself for the illegal U.S. military occupation. So that's who he's actually not everybody agrees. Not all Hawaiians are in immediate agreement about everything, right? But one thing is certainly that there is a U.S. colonial and anti-Hawaiian stopping our self-determination problem, right? That's right. And so he's taking a more he's going through the international law path, trying to sue, right? So that's why he kind of but he was also on Mauna Kea. He's definitely been involved in this. He was also radicalized because he was in the U.S. military committing colonial imperial atrocities in the Middle East in the 90s. He was in the Gulf War, right? So he comes out of like witnessing what the U.S. did, being inside the U.S. imperial system, right, in the U.S. military, overthrowing democracies, right? And then he came back to Hawaii and was acting as kind of one of spearheading the direct legal confrontations in international law, right? In a suit against the United States of America. So anyways, I'm not part of the sovereignty movement. It's a political movement made up of diverse groups of Native Hawaiians. What they're doing is they're pursuing their own version of sovereignty, and that is viewing sovereignty as an aspiration, not a reality. The United States claims that it passed a law in 1898 called a joint resolution purporting to annex Hawaii. The problem is an American law could no more annex Hawaiian kingdom than the United States Congress passing a law today. So that's like one where he's talking about how like this is not really a problem of Hawaiians have to achieve sovereignty. It's really like, but this is where this is where it gets really interesting. This is what I'm always talking about, which is that the idea that there is international law, and when depending on what level of Silver Spook I'm at, DEFCON 5 or DEFCON 6, but the idea that there is international law at all is actually a joke under the current system. Certainly, when it really matters, the United States doesn't. Nobody has sovereignty. Canada don't have sovereignty. Canada is run by the U.S. Richest and most powerful people, with some figments of independence, right? Nobody has sovereignty in the West is the reality, right? Like, and I don't mean that to like make light of the situation for Native Hawaiians or other people like more directly occupied. Like people in Iraq don't have sovereignty, right? The people that have the most sovereignty are the countries that are growing parts of the multipolar world that actually respect actual other people's self-determination. This is why the Chinese are very careful to always talk about respecting territorial integrity, respecting the self-determination of places, right? Because they're trying to break away from the U.S.-led Western colonial imperialist order, right? Which is about vassalization. The West even call all the countries that are allied with the United States vassals, right? When they're being more honest, they admit there's no such thing as democracy in the Western world. They admit there's no such thing as sovereignty and self-determination in the Western world. There is only Washington, D.C., and Wall Street determination. Even in America, there's no democracy, right? So this is like but then the problem gets more complex, which is like, well, what do we do, right? So if we're all technically, we could be self-determined, but we have economic and military threats at all times, right, to that sovereignty, then what do we do? Well, part of it is everybody has to understand the reality. That's what I try to do, right, as much as possible. I would disagree with some things with Dr. Sai in the sense that like you can't sue your way into mass, collective, educated, active action, Now, lawsuits can help in some cases. When people go to prison for multi-hundred thousands of people doing a protest against a telescope, that can help. But without the activation of the masses, you cannot sue your way out of you can't go to a justice system to get justice in an unjust empire, So that's where, but at the same time, I'm not saying that we shouldn't also take every tactic possible, But reality is we need all the things happening, and we don't really. Nobody knows what ultimately we will end the colonial capitalist multi-century nightmare, in Hawaii and around the world. But one thing that we can say for sure is that if we don't recognize that, coming back to if we don't recognize that we are in a funhouse nightmare crisis called colonial capitalism, right? It's led by the U.S. and all of its vassals in the G7, Canada, Europe, New Zealand, Australia, Japan, right? Dumping its nuke wastewater into water. The U.S. wanted Japan to do that, by the way. The U.S., New Zealand, Australia, the European Union all funded the scientific study that said it's okay for Japan to drop carbon-14 and basically nuclear bomb the world with radiation, because it's going to go into the fresh water, in the salt water. Carbon-14 goes everywhere. It's in Dr. Strangelove, in fact. Japan is Dr. Strangelove nuking the world right now. And the U.S. said, good. Europe, Canada, New Zealand, Australia. The IAE is the international nuclear organization that founded, that did the study that said it's okay, but it's not okay. That was a U.S. and all of its free democracies funded that study. So anyway, the reality is there's no sovereignty, but we have to understand that. If you don't understand that, there's no sovereignty for Americans. There's no sovereignty for Europeans, right? You do whatever the billionaires who run the U.S. empire and the plutocracy said. There's no sovereignty for Canadians. You do whatever the black media or whatever your fake liberal media said. You know, if you're Canadian, you are invested in killing Hawaiians. The Canadian pension funds are invested in the West Maui, water depletion for corporate profit fund. That literally are why the wildfires happen. There is no sovereignty for you. You know, you just think you have a slightly better deal in the non-sovereign neo-feudal hell world. You're like slightly higher up on the totem pole, but you're not sovereign. So anyways, okay, but let me come back to the topic and finish. So the United States claims that it passed a law in 1898 called a Joint Resolution purported to annex Hawaii. The problem is, an American law could no more annex Hawaii, as we already said that. Sovereignty is Hawaiians being self-determining, which is to say we decide our form of self-governance. The U.S. is the perpetrator of the crimes against us, so the U.S. deciding what Hawaiians can and cannot do is like asking the thief if he wants a side of fries to go with everything he just stole from us. Yeah. So yeah, the U.S. cannot decide, because the U.S. stole everything. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Kaniela Ing is at the forefront of a lot of these actions. I share his stuff all the time. So you should follow. He's also a former representative. He's part of the Green New Deal network. Yeah. So so they like, this is like, the thing is, this NBC News story, for some strange reason, is not just like some puff piece to make it seem like America cares about Hawaiians. They're actually asking Native Hawaiians that are directly involved in the anti-colonial, anti-capitalist Hawaiian sovereignty struggle. So that's interesting. Everything needs to be done. Yeah, so sovereignty activist, national director of the Climate Organization and the Green New Deal Network. Everything needs to be done with an eye towards ho'omana lahui, the power, rebuilding the power of our nation, not just a legal status. Questions like who recognizes us as a sovereign kingdom, that's less important than that we have self-determination. Like, it's important that we have self-determination as a nation. Like, educating, activating, and organizing all Hawaiians, and not just being Native Hawaiian, being a member of the sovereign country of Hawaii is not the same. Native Hawaiians and people who are Hawaiian is one thing, but people who are Black and Asian, like I frequently bring up, people who are Black and Asian and also citizens of the country of Hawaii in the 1800s, right? So this idea that, well, if you're not Hawaiian, then you have to leave. This is not true. Now, of course, I'm one Hawaiian. I'm not. We are not a monolith. Like, as you can tell, there are some slight differences of opinion and of sentiment and of position and of ideas for the way forward between these Hawaiians. They're not all exactly the same. But what is very similar is that there is massive U.S. crimes that have been done. There is massive problems that have to be undone, right? But anyways, what I would say to that is, it is important who recognizes you, right? This is why the U.S. is hell-bent on getting everyone in the world to recognize Taiwan as a country, right? Is because and China is like, do not do that. Trying to stop that from happening, because the more countries that recognize a fraudulent imperialist narrative in order to get another Ukraine horrible atrocity happening for imperialist benefit, to maintain global capitalism, right, by causing another quagmire and mass death and cover to justify the lockdown and the collapse of the Chinese economy by shutting down the Strait of Malacca and all the South China Sea and all of that international trade, based on the U.S. imperial think tank, the Rand Corporation study that said China would be hurt more from a proxy war in that region than the U.S. would. It's all about an attempt to maintain U.S. hegemony. That's the purpose of the number one lightning rod issue for the Chinese people. That is the Taiwan issue. And so the recognition of Taiwan, it does matter. It does matter. Just as an example, if China, Russia, just China, but if, let's say, China, Russia, Brazil, South Africa, India, and Ethiopia, and Venezuela recognize Hawaii as a sovereign country. Imagine if China and Russia said, we're not going to do business with American government in Hawaii. Hawaii has to have its own ports. The Hawaiian ports, we're not going to go by the Jones Act, which is a law that makes everything in Hawaii more expensive to control Native Hawaiians, right? that says all ships must land in the U.S. continent port before they come to Hawaii. That makes everything more expensive and it hurts us, but it enslaves Hawaiians to the U.S., right? Let's say the Chinese said, we're not going to recognize the Jones Act because the United States doesn't have a government in Hawaii. So China starts doing business directly with Hawaiians, right? China makes everything. So we'd be paying way less because the Chinese, when you buy straight from China, it's like 10 times cheaper a lot of the times, 3 to 10 times cheaper. So Hawaiians get products 10 times cheaper. We get Belt and Road Initiative in Hawaii. We don't have to go through the U.S. anymore, right? The U.S. all of a sudden, no, the U.S. is going to freak out. The U.S. is going to get very upset, right? That does cause major problems for the U.S. occupation. But, China is not trying to start a war. But the thing is, this is why we understand why that's dangerous for China. China is like not. If the U.S. suddenly goes, you know what, we're recognizing Taiwan. There's a high probability China is already going, you know what, we will recognize Ryukyu, Okinawa, because Okinawa is not part of Japan. Okinawa, like Hawaii, is a illegally U.S. and Japan colonized part. The Japanese are involved in dual colonization in Hawaii. Japanese billionaires own huge swaths of Hawaii too. So just like Okinawa, China actually said, we're going to start recognizing Ryukyu as sovereign. If you want to recognize Taiwan, we're gonna take your colonies, right? Not that China wants to, but China doesn't want no war because U.S. is going to fall apart either way. And this is why it's like, I don't know if that's really a good strategy, because even though Hawaii is under illegal military occupation, the U.S. might start some ridiculous war if it wasn't thought through very specifically. If like China, Russia, and BRICS all recognize Hawaii as sovereign, it could be a pretext for some conflagration that would not be good. Given enough time, the U.S. is going to fall apart. And it is important that Hawaiians activate, but it should be recognized that if China, Russia, France even, if countries around the world, other than the U.S., started recognizing Hawaii as sovereign, the way that the U.S. wants countries to recognize Taiwan as independent, then the U.S. would be in the wrong to continue, because under international law, under NBC News reports and confirms the U.S. stands in flagrant violation. But do you see how that functions, right? The U.S. just lives in permanent criminality. The European colonizers, France lives in permanent criminality in Niger, right? It's just the thing is, right? It's like the statement where they say, right? It's like a thief stole everything you have and then wants your fries too, right? But that's the situation. The U.S. is a thief that stole everything from Hawaii. Europe, just on a global scale, stole everything from Africa. Is still stealing Niger's uranium until very recently, right? Now, right? The Asian, all the Asian silk and tea and copper and rubber, Vietnam, China, you name it, they stole everything, right? The South China Sea that shouldn't have any European, British, AUKUS aircraft carriers, jets, or anything else. It's ridiculous, right? The U.S. is still in Asia's house, right? U.S. Europeans are still inside of Asia's house, stealing their fries, stealing their resources, stealing their everything with their ships, right? The U.S. is like a thief that has a gun to China's face, still inside of China's house, going like, "Give me all your stuff," and China's like, "Well, get the fuck out of my house." Right, but it's a lot like Hawaii, right? France and the U.S. are in Britain; they're all in Africa. They're like inside of Britain's house with AFRICOM, with the French military bases in Mali, Burkina Faso, just recently getting their ass kicked out. They're still in Africa's face, going, "Give me all your stuff," right? And that's what the U.S. is in Hawaii, going like, "You should be happy that I'm not killing you while I'm in your house, taking all your stuff, burning Maui down, and then giving it to private corporations." But you see, that's the fucked up reality, is where the Western order is just a Western criminality. The imperial capitalist order is just ongoing mass atrocities and killing the earth. That's why the U.S. is happy to poison the sea, because the U.S. don't care about the future. The West they have no future, right? They don't give a fuck. They don't care if the whole entire biosphere, the air, the water, the land, the plants, the birds, and everything are filled with radioactive isotopes and collapsing, and everyone gets cancer in the world at an increasing rate than they already are. Because they live in the West is straight up cancer. A planetary slow motion and then sometimes fast motion destruction and death and killing and suffering and enslavement and violations of sovereignty and genocide for a tiny handful of people to make a ton of money. Kaniela Ng sovereignty activists. So but that's where it's like it's a very tricky issue because like especially like, we have this homicidal maniac in my house. He shouldn't even be there, but how do I like get him out without him killing everyone, including himself? The U.S. is like in your house. The U.S. is just like a terrorist organization. It's just a terrorist organization. They're in your house. They're going, if you don't let me take more of your stuff, I'm gonna kill you and I kill myself. Let me take more of your stuff, I'll blow the whole house up. Right? On the biggest scale, that's the U.S. and China. Right? If you don't let me keep being number one, taking the world's stuff, I will nuke this world. Right? And the U.S. in Hawaii is like, if you ask for me to give any of my land I stole from you back, I'm gonna kill you all. And I'm gonna kill myself too, because you're not gonna be able to last. If the U.S. starts mass shooting Hawaiians like in public, it's gonna be very bad, very very bad for the U.S. in the current circumstances. But they threaten that all the time. They threaten like if you don't do what we say. On Mauna Kea, the U.S. had a sign that said, if you attempt to stop TMT, the United States military will kill you. That's basically what the sign said. They said it's only in Hawaiian, so that white, Japanese, and other people going to the telescopes couldn't read it. But to the Hawaiians, they said there will be no health and there will be no help for you here. You will not survive. If you Hawaiians challenge America on Mauna Kea, you will not survive. That's what the sign said. Now they bluffed, right? But they did bring military. They brought B-52s. They brought Black Hawk copters. They brought the sound cannons. They brought the military and the police to Mauna Kea. So, but that's what it is. It's an eternal racket. It's an eternal threat. It's an eternal intimidation scheme. It's eternal. That's what colonialism is, right? It's like if you try to undo this unjust system, we'll kill everyone. Oh, we're really nice people though, actually. So, anyways, okay. I gotta get out of here. Why are history discussions around Hawaiian sovereignty necessary to context to the tragedy in Lahaina? This isn't just a climate change issue, is it? It's about destruction of the land and the water over a century of it, setting it up for a terrible drought and some hurricane winds 500 miles away. If that's going to be discussed, it has to be understood in the context of the theft of our nationhood, which enables the theft of that land and water. Will the fires in Lahaina have an impact on action around sovereignty? Will we be seeing a greater thirst to engage in this topic? My sense is when there is a tragedy here or anywhere else, Hawaiian rights to self-determination are the first thing to be thrown aside, even when it is the most relevant. You can never underestimate the power of fear. Either we Hawaiians will pull our movement out of the ashes of Lahaina, or our movement for justice will be buried in those ashes, possibly forever. I mean, it's a very sad, but it's a very real reality, Although what I would say is, I don't think that, I think that there will always be, well, I can't say always, because many indigenous peoples, like Hawaiians, will not be the first people to have completely been wiped off the face of the planet, because there are hundreds of indigenous turtle people and Native Americans who they're just gone. They don't exist anymore. They have names. We remember they had names for their tribes, right? Gerald Horn brought them up. There's hundreds of peoples. Like we still have Anishinaabe. We still have Blackfoot Native people. We still have, Lakota people, right? We still have Algonquin people. But there are hundreds of people that are just completely annihilated. North, Central, South America. There are African peoples that are just annihilated. They're gone forever. There are people in Asia that are gone. In Taiwan specifically, multiple tribes. Their language, they had a whole language wiped out by U.S. and Taiwan and by Japan. U.S. and by the Dutch and Japan. Japan used chemical warfare to completely kill. In one attack, they killed multiple indigenous peoples and they wiped them off the face of the earth. So the U.S. is in the process of wiping off Hawaiians from the face of the earth. Now, there are more Hawaiians, right? There's at least 1 million Hawaiians. But by displacing us, by taking the land, by brainwashing us, by eradicating our history and culture, making us go to public, private, and charter schools in the Hawaii that is run by the U.S. empire, that wants to eradicate this true history, wipe our culture out, turn us into just this fake plastic hula dance, Disney-fied version of tropical theme park Hawaii. That's not real Hawaii. The U.S. is definitely hopes that Hawaiians will be buried in the ashes of Maui wildfires forever. That is the truth. That is what they would like. I hope that doesn't happen. That's why the U.S. doesn't give us any money. So any support through Ko-Fi and Patreon, we really do appreciate it, because Holly and I have to teach other Hawaiians and our own kids Hawaiian and our own history, because the U.S. will not teach it. My as I said, my parents are American Christianized, genocided Hawaiians. They are from the nation of Hawaii, but they don't view themselves as Hawaiian. They deny that the U.S. ever did anything bad to Hawaiians. They say that Catholic Church saved Native people. So genocide is real. My family has been they weren't been killed. Genocide is not just about killing a lot of people. This is a mistake of the West. They don't understand what it means. Genocide is the erasure, wiping out, and annihilation of a particular culture, language, lifeways, all the aspects that makes a people, right? You can have a mass death. Like if somebody goes up and shoots a mall, that's terrible, right? Many people could die, right? Even in a war, thousands of people could die. That's not the same as genocide. Genocide is the attempt to wipe out people, culture, language, nation, what binds those people together in a history, a real lived history. And that's what the U.S. is doing in Hawaii to this very day. So it's very important that people understand that. So genocide is not just death. People getting killed, that's not just, you could not like someone and then kill a lot of people from a place. But the attempt to annihilate the people often it comes with, for a colonial interest. Sometimes it is, it's fascism, right? But there's almost always, there is a money interest involved in it, which is if we wipe out Hawaiians, we can turn Hawaii, we can subdue it and control it under American interests. We can force Americanize them. We can make them fight our wars for us because they believe that they're fighting for America and they're all Americans, right? So genocide always has an imperial, colonial, and capitalist component. Even the fascism in Germany was backed by Western Europeans. The imperialists in the U.S. and the UK. Later on, they go, "Oops, did we make Hitler? Did we make Mussolini?" They made them. They funded and operated far right to try to get rid of the communism, and so genocide, the genocide of Romani people, genocide of Jewish people, was part of money-making capitalist imperial operations. So it's important for people to always remember that. So anyways, the topic of sovereignty and self-determination or decision-making control, critical to Maui's ability to grieve, mend, and move forward. When we talk about returning to the old ways, we mean reinstating a sustainable value system where our nation's wealth is measured by the health of our land, air, and water. Systems of capitalism and colonialism cause a disaster, and the values of sovereign Hawaii, once exemplified, is a solution to carry us forward. So this is, I talk about the real history of Hawaii frequently, but if you want to learn where Hawaii had the highest literacy rate, virtually no homelessness, renewable powered, nationalized free electricity, spun by waterfalls, the world's first universal healthcare system, an anti-imperialist socialist stance, and was the most advanced country in the world, and the world's highest literacy rate. I frequently talk about that on Twitch and on my Twitter account, so you can follow that. But anyways, that is the truth. Hawaii was the solution, and America is the disease. In fact, the West is the disease. The colonial capitalist system that the U.S. and the West back is the disease. And so the United States, through the state of Hawaii as the occupant and in fact control the majority of territory in Hawaii, is obligated to establish a military government to provisionally administer the laws of the occupied state, the Hawaiian Kingdom. Right now, there is no centralized control. It's very decentralized, fragmented between federal, state, and county governments operating on their own. Maui County has got to deal with the blowback on the recovery. So when you talk about people who are there as victims, the first thing they're looking at is survival. The state of Hawaii will be forced to comply with international law by transforming itself into a military government in order to bring centralized control to the crisis that reaches across all islands, not just Lahaina. Lahaina could be the flashpoint to drive compliance. So the state of Hawaii will be forced to comply with international law. Now that's something that I think he would like to see, but I don't know that the state, the U.S. doesn't comply with international law. That's the problem that I have with, I'm not saying that he's incorrect, but assuming that the United States will comply with international law, for example, not committing wars of aggression like the invasion of Iraq, right? The U.S. would go by international law. For example, not demanding freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, which the United States has not even signed. The international agreements the U.S. has not even signed to be a part of, right? The United States would go by international law. For example, not constantly having Nancy Pelosi and high-level U.S. politicians and U.S. government entities calling for Taiwan independence while simultaneously having a one China policy on their website, violating international law. The U.S. doesn't care about international law. So that's where I like the idea that the idea that if you win a court case, it's like trying to win a court case again. This is like getting a treaty from the British and going, oh, great, now they won't hurt us. You know, how did that go for the native people of Turtle Island? How did Native Americans do? Right, the Americans are just the British with more fucking Yankee cowboy hat characteristics. Right, how did the Indians had treaties in India with the British? The Chinese had treaties. The British followed the treaty. Treaties, laws, it's laughable. The West, when they don't like a law, they just write a new law. For like the 2009 financial collapse, they're like, oh, I don't like not being able to steal trillions of dollars from the planetary economy under the subprime mortgage and the no income, no jobs, no assets scheme and $500 billion of collateralized debt obligations, right? So I think what I'll do is I'll just have all the senators and the governors and the president and the Supreme Court that I own rewrite the laws and re-adjudicate and re-execute, and I'll have new rules that I will buy because I'm Goldman Sachs and I have multiple cabinet members in Obama's administration, and I'll have them just like, I'll have Rahm Emanuel and I'll have Eric Holder and all of my friends in the cabinet. I'll just have the Attorney General not prosecute. That's all I'll do, right? I'll have Kamala Harris not prosecute Goldman Sachs made men, like for example, the One West Bank operator and Trump administration official who was a former Goldman Sachs employee, right? Like, so the reality is the West don't care about international law. So anyway, but this is I'm talking about, you know, what over the longer term, what are the how do I think this is going to come about? That's a little bit too much for this stream, I think. This is actually the second part of a stream that got cut in half, but if you just watched this, then the earlier stream was the previous YouTube video because the internet blipped out. But anyway, so Hawaii crisis and opportunity, how Maui fire might change Hawaii and the U.S. Was the original video. I don't know how this is going to show up. So, but you know, long story short. But the interesting thing is NBC News is talking about Hawaiian sovereignty and the Hawaiian independence and the U.S. illegal occupation. So that's pretty amazing. That's pretty. I don't know what that signifies, but I don't know what exactly happened there. But I think that the more people that learn about that, the better. So, because the reality is that we do need a Steve Mnuchin was the Goldman Sachs employee that was made man that was working with Kamala Harris. And Kamala Harris could have prosecuted him. He was even a Republican, but she did it because the U.S. government, and including the legal system and all the attorneys general, work for criminals, like the richest people in the world. So Hawaii's crisis and Hawaii's opportunity is that the crisis on Maui, which has one last thing, I want to just bring this up because this is an unfolding story, and I just want to make sure this is out there. Okay, so. You know, I talked about how the U.S. the directed energy weapon thing. That's some unhinged. That is another mirror world basket of fantasy land for Westerners to fall into, right? But the fires themselves, however they were started, there's a lot of. It's possible that the electric company that failed to maintain lines that were blown over, and then the sparks from the electrical lines lit the underbrush that later turned into the massive conflagration. Okay. But often the West will put out multiple actual conspiracies, or conspiracy theories, like the directed energy weapon, in order to cover up actual horrible crimes, right? And one of these is that the United States police barricaded. And this is again, this is Associated Press. The AP is owned by it's another mega U.S. capitalist conglomerate. They don't care about Hawaiians, right? AP publishes all kind of wrong stuff, right? But they had to admit, because a journalist, accidentally a journalist just does some research and they're like, what, right? So what was discovered is that the U.S. police barricaded people into the fires. Okay, so I just want to make sure that this is out there, because now if I find out some explanation for why the U.S. police barricaded Hawaiians and people living in Lahaina, majority Hawaiian, majority non-white, majority people of color, right? If I can find out why they did this, I will report that. But what we see is, let me see that. So AP News, let's see, AP fire barricades Hawaii. Yeah, here. Okay, so this is reported. This is not just me saying this. This is the Associated Press that's confirming what I suspected. But again, okay, can I get the okay? In deadly wildfires, many had no warning and no way out. Those who dodged the barricade survived. Okay, so this is a real news story. I'm not just like cutting this out. This is not some conspiracy. This is just like corporate media reporting on something that's very damaging to the U.S. Okay, but it's it's almost like the U.S. is giving death to us Native people. Okay, so people, as I said in the previous streams, people trying to leave were barricaded in, and it's not just a bottleneck. Last time I thought it was just people were leaving and there was a police checkpoint. No, the police barricaded people from leaving. They had a full like blockade of police cars, and they ordered people trying to escape Maui back into the burning Lahaina, right? Causing hundreds of deaths, because a lot of people that died in their cars, the reason why they were in their cars in a traffic jam is because the police were forcing them to stay in the fires. That's I don't know what that just sounds like mass. I mean, unless somebody can tell me, oh, the police had to barricade the road because there was a bigger fire somewhere else, or the police barricaded the road because what? Why would you barricade people into a fire? Okay. This is from the report. As flames tore through the West Maui neighborhood, car after car of fleeing residents headed for the only paved road out of a town in a desperate race for safety. Car after car was turned back towards the rapidly spreading wildfire by a barricade blocking access to Highway 30. It was a Maui police, which is a U.S. police barricade. One family swerved around the barricade and was in a safe nearby town. 48 minutes later, another drove four-wheel drive car down a dirt road to escape. One man took a dirt road uphill, climbing above the fire and watching as Lahaina burned. He picked his way through the flames, smoke, and rubble to pull survivors to safety. Dozens of others found themselves caught in a hellscape, their cars jammed together on a narrow road, surrounded by flames on three sides and a rocky ocean waves on the fourth. Some died in their cars, others tried to run for safety. Okay, so why, if anybody knows why the U.S. police, why the American Imperial Occupation Police, right? Why would you barricade people into a place that is on fire? Right? Shouldn't you be opening the lanes and trying to escalate and get people through as fast as possible to escape the fire? As an example, there's wildfires in Canada that are terrible, and there's a police blockade, but the police blockade is to stop people going in the fire, not to keep people in the fire zone from getting out. And there's some terrible people that are like demanding to get through the police blockade into the fire area. But in Lahaina, in Maui, the police had a blockade to stop people getting out of the fire. You see the difference there? So, I'm just saying, there's no explanation for why this happened. The AP news story is like great because imagine you're a journalist. You're just a regular journalist. You're like, hey, I want to do journalism, and you're like, what? People are calling you saying, oh my God, in the fires, we were forced back into the fire. The police forced us back into the fire zone, and when we died, or forced us back in, and all the other people got stuck, and then they died in their car, right? So I could see from the bypass people were stuck on balconies, so I went down and checked it out. The road closures, some because of fire, some because of down power lines, contributed to making historical line a site of the deadliest. Okay, so if the road closure is because of fire, right, or down power lines, okay. Okay, so if it's for a down power line, but if an area is on fire, right? But again, I have not gotten any actual explanation, right? If the down power line is obviously gonna have to, the down power line. There could be more than one, but if there's a down power line, but if there's a mega fire happening, right? How can you be sending people back into the fire, right? People have to be getting out of that. People have to be getting out of that fire. Just, I mean, as an example, a power line versus a conflagration that's gonna boil alive in their cars countless people, right? Um, I think it's pretty obvious, right, what should be happening. So, but again, the U.S. doesn't want to. The U.S. don't care to respond to this. So what I'm gonna assume, right, what I'm gonna assume is the U.S. is happy at minimum to let Hawaiians die in a fire and possibly to murder Hawaiians using their police to blockade Hawaiians in. And the reason why this has a precedent, like I said last time, because in 1900, guards, police officers, and white citizens, all armed, forced anyone of the Hawaiians and Asians and Pacific Islanders back into a blazing quarantine zone. White victims of the plague were housed in postures. So for white victims and for like rich victims, which were mostly all white in this U.S. occupation, they were in a special hotel far away, right? And for the Hawaiians and the Asians, they got forced back into the fire. So, and this is a controlled fire, and there's no information about this. After this happened, the U.S., a lot of things just suddenly went missing, So, and also there is evidence that the causes for the fire and why the fire happened and where the fire happened on Maui, even the U.S. media recently reported that there was attempted cover-ups of that information, like, what the cause of the fire was, because, it's possible the electric company could be liable. But I just want to, if I can get, some kind of actual explanation for why there were barricades in the middle of this horrible fire causing people to die, then I mean, it's not actually, this doesn't change anything else. But what does changes is whether the U.S. committed outright mass murder of Native Hawaiians, because if the police blockaded people in, into the fire zone, and knew what they were doing, which, I wouldn't put it past the U.S., right? Then this is mass murder of Hawaiians using wildfires. Okay, anyways. That's the end of the stream. Until next time, don't forget, we'll be back later on, but we'll be back later on we'll be back later on Twitch, and everything we do here is supported by direct support through Ko-Fi, direct support through Patreon, as well as through gabbing of the games on Steam and itch. Like, I do sell games, but I don't sell them as much nowadays on here. But yeah, we have Neofeud, that is a cyberpunk adventure game that I'm currently nearly done with the sequel. And also we have other games like Decolonators, Indigistar, Pigeon with Gun, and Woman is a book by Holly that's about being raised in right-wing evangelical Protestant Christianity. And you can get it for free or throw some money our way when you pick it up. So consider helping us out in any or all those ways. Don't forget, you can follow at Silverspoon Games at Octodon.social, at Silverspoon Games at Mastodon.social. And you can also follow Silverspoon Guy here on Twitter. And you can also follow Silverspoon Games on Twitter for the game stuff. And you can also follow Terminus C, which is a cyberpunk RPG that I'm the content director and lead writer of. Most of what I do is actually making video games, and then what other time that I can spare, I try to do some action to save everything, including our U.S. illegally occupied Hawaii. I just want to say, U.S. is an illegal occupation and fraudulent annexation. Thus said NBC News. NBC News. That's what anybody asks, what are you talking about, Walt? It's mainstream. It's common sense. This is common knowledge. NBC News knows this. Everybody knows. Anyway, Holly is my partner, wife and partner, producer, manager with Kate Nix, a parent, caregiver. Holly helps raise our children with actual Hawaiian language and history and culture, which they won't get from any Western U.S. public, private, or charter school. So please help us keep doing that education as well. And Holly also works with Kate Nix, the monthly interactive variety show, and Handmade Lancaster in PA and Pennsylvania by Kate. And don't forget to also follow Holly. And thanks to all the people on the list for your support. Sorry the stream got cut in half, but the internet went out because I said too many true things, and the US don't like me. So thanks to all these people on this list, and until next time, you know, stay safe out there. You know, every crisis is an opportunity. Um, don't leave in the crises. Don't be shaking out of your, you know, your matrix into yet another right wing matrix or a liberal matrix. Enter the anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, global South led truth world, real world, and have a good time.